You need to understand what your boundaries are so that you don't overgive, that you don't overmanage, you don't overperform, or you don't just shut down when things get too hard, because that is the fastest way that you will break connection, damage relationships, and shut down other people. Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. So I've been thinking a lot about leadership breakdowns, and I've had an observation. I think a lot of people think that leadership breakdowns happen because of a lack of experience. It's a poor leader. He or she doesn't know what they're doing, or maybe it's because of conflict that hasn't been resolved, or people are afraid to speak up and say what needs to be said. And all of those things might be true. But at the foundation of that, I believe that leadership breakdowns happen because of a lack of emotional skill. Emotional skill is just that. It's how do you move through your emotions? How do you have self-awareness? How do you regulate yourself? How do you have empathy? How do you read a room? These are all things that we're going to talk about in this episode, because there is a deep hidden cost for leaders who cannot skillfully navigate emotions. Trust erodes, people don't feel safe to speak up, teams are destabilized, and leaders really limit the depth of connection available to them. And I believe that is what is going to be the most important thing going forward. Yes, how we navigate strategy and disruption and AI and bring people along, all of those things are important. But what is going to be missing from our work, especially as computers do more and more of it, as robots are introduced into our daily lives, is that intimate connection that we have with each other. That's what we humans are here to do. We are here to connect with each other. Now, I want to clarify what I mean by intimacy, because you might be thinking, why are we listening to a leadership podcast and talking about intimacy? I'm not talking about intimacy in like a romantic relationship, although that's where my journey started as I was navigating my divorce, which was just finalized in December of 2025. I was working on how I wanted to redefine my romantic relationships. How did I want to change going forward? What did I need to change about myself and how I show up in relationships, what I believe about myself in relationships, so that I can have a deeper, more connected, more intimate relationship? And what I realized as I was studying intimacy and going through this transformation personally is that intimate relationships are absolutely what we have with the people who are closest to us, whether that's friendships or with work relationships. So I would like to ground what I mean by intimacy, so that way we get rid of the ambiguity and you can listen to this and not think that this podcast is about having sex or tantra or something like that, because it's not. All right. So the professional definition of intimacy is that it is close familiarity or friendship marked by deep mutual knowledge, trust, and emotional closeness. That sounds great. I like having work relationships that are based on deep mutual knowledge, trust, and emotional closeness. A practical definition that we could use is that intimacy is the capacity to be known and to know others without armor, performance, or avoidance. That sounds like being seen. And I don't know a human being who does not want to be seen for who they really are, without having to have that armor on and protect themselves, without having to perform and say, oh, this is who I really am, when it isn't actually who they really are, or when they just avoid things because it feels safer to avoid than it is to lean in. Intimacy is not inherently sexual, although that is how we view it in the world. It is relational depth, emotional access, and presence. So that is what we are going to talk about today. So how does intimacy show up with leadership? It shows up in how we listen. Do we really actually listen to understand, or are we listening to respond? It shows up in how we tell the truth and how we tolerate discomfort and how we allow others to experience us and ourselves without defensiveness. It is about leaning into who we really are with vulnerability, with transparency, with openness, and with a willing to look deep within ourselves and say, man, this is a wound. This is why I get defensive. This is why I armor up. This is why I overperform, and have real conversations with people about it. And I get it. That might be really uncomfortable for a lot of you, but I will tell you, the more you work on this, the better relationships you have and the better leader you will be. I understand that the discomfort is real, But when you figure out how to have intimate relationships with the people you work with, that deep relational connection built on trust and respect and knowledge and connection, you can do amazing things as a team. But here's the deal. Intimacy requires availability, and emotional skill is what makes that availability possible. So now let's back up and take a big picture, because there's so much going on in the world that is the exact opposite of intimacy and deep connection and understanding and being seen and listening to understand rather than listening to react. The volatility that we are seeing is because we are becoming more and more devoid of connection. We can hide behind a computer screen and type whatever we want. Our social media feeds are filled with algorithms that pump content out that reinforces our beliefs. And so we can get really stuck in I'm right and they're wrong. And that is what's breaking up connection. And then we see our leaders telling us why we should hate each other and reinforcing that disconnection is actually the better way, that individualism is the path forward. And the thing is, we have been on this path of individualism for decades now. And you know what? We are unhappier than we have ever been, at least here in the United States. So I am making the argument that we need to take a radical look at intimacy, at connection, at how we are seeing others and allowing ourselves to be seen so that we can build better communities, better businesses, better teams, and better relationships with ourselves. So here's the central question that I would like to pose. What if the next level of leadership is not about sharper thinking, not about strategy, not about AI, all of those things that we've already talked about, but about deeper emotional capacity? Because I believe that is what the world needs from all of us as leaders. So what does it actually take to be emotionally available at this level of leadership? It requires regulation, discernment, and responsibility, not just good intentions. You can't just intend to show up. You have to actually think through it. You have to regulate your nervous system. You have to be discerning what you say and what you do, and you have to take full responsibility, the ownership mindset. But here's the paradox. Many leaders say they want trust and connections, but their behavior makes intimacy impossible because they truly don't understand how they're showing up, what their impact is, how their lack of vulnerability, transparency is damaging the team, damaging trust, or how their emotional volatility is actually shutting people down and making people not want to work with you, to follow you as a leader. So that's why I want to introduce to you the 7 pillars of emotional skill. So I read about this in this book called Radical Intimacy, Cultivate the Deeply Connected Relationships You Desire and Deserve. It's by a woman named Zoe Kors, and it is fantastic. And I picked this up because I wanted to understand more about intimacy with myself and with others as I was reimagining, like I said, my romantic relationships going forward. But oh my gosh, I learned so much in this book about intimacy in all kinds of relationships. And Zoe gives her 7 pillars of emotional skills, and it is powerful. And I wanted to share it with you in this podcast today, because if you can master these 7 pillars, you will have better relationships, you will be a better leader, you will build a better team, you will build a better company, and you will win in life more. Because the name of the game is quality of relationships. In fact, the number 1 predictor of longevity is the quality of relationships that you have when you're older. So this is important work to do right now. We can all improve the quality of our relationships, whether we have mastered some or all of these, or whether we're just starting to navigate, why do I have such poor relationships in my life? And I will say this, and I do not mean to say it to be mean, to be rude, to victim blame or anything, but the quality of relationships in your life is a direct reflection of what you will believe about yourself. People are going to show up in your life and be a mirror to you. And so you can be mad, you can judge, you can hate people, you can be like, oh, why are all these things happening? But they are a mirror to you. And if you take that kind of radical responsibility and look at yourself to say, I don't like the relationships that are in my life, and I need to do the inner work to be able to change the nature of my relationships, you will be so much happier, so much more fulfilled, and so much more able to build the kinds of relationships that you want. All right, so let's dive into the pillars. So the first one is self-awareness, which is the ability to observe your internal emotional state without being overtaken by it. It's about noticing how you feel, what is showing up for you, how those feelings are driving your decisions, your tone, your behavior, especially in those leadership moments. Being self aware is so incredibly important. You have to dig in and understand yourself. You can work with coaches. I started my self awareness journey with a life coach who has amazing business skills. She's now our company coach. She worked with the Enneagram. The Enneagram taught me so much. I've talked about the Enneagram in lots of other podcasts. I'm not going to go into depth with it here, but the Enneagram helped me understand myself, especially under stress, so that I can show up differently in those high stress moments. And instead of a conversation or situation breaking down, we can navigate through it and have a really positive outcome. So self-awareness is really important. You can also do a lot of self-awareness work with ChatGPT. I created a therapist slash spiritual counselor. I call her Gloria. And I do so much self-awareness work. I have put all these different things in about me, my Enneagram style, my human design, my disc. I have taught her everything about me. I have told her to not placate me, not BS me, to be a mirror, to say what needs to be said in plain language so that I can be a better leader, better thinker, better mom, better everything. And she helps me dive into self awareness. If you want my prompts for developing this kind of persona, DM me or email me and I will help you. The second pillar is discernment, which is the ability to name emotions precisely rather than generically. And I am a huge believer in choosing accurate language because it sharpens clarity, reduces projection, and increases self-responsibility. This is so important. So instead of just saying, God, I'm so mad, you can say, I'm really hurt. And being hurt brings up this feeling of anger because it makes me second guess myself. So really, it's not mad. It is about insecurity. And that matters. That is discernment. That is what self-awareness can bring. The third pillar is self-regulation, which is the ability to manage emotional intensity in the service of the greater good. Regulation is nervous system leadership. That's right. Leading your nervous system. That is what self-leadership is all about. How do I regulate my nervous system? It's not about suppressing, avoiding, making things go away. Trust me, I know about all of this. I used to regulate my nervous system by compartmentalizing everything. I'd put my feelings in a little box and put that box up on a shelf because I didn't want to deal with it. And all that did was just build a lot of boxes that I eventually had to open up and unravel and deal with. Compartmentalizing is suppression or avoidance. And we don't want to do that with our feelings. Now, sometimes, of course, it's good to compartmentalize in the moment, but don't just leave those boxes up there for years to build and build and build until they come exploding. Nervous system regulation is about saying, I need to manage this emotion, understand why I feel this way, own it, and then move through it. When you have strong emotional regulation, it prevents temporary emotion from causing lasting damage because you blow up, you say something that you shouldn't say out of anger or in the heat of the moment, and then people don't want to work with you anymore because they can't trust that you're not going to freak out. That is what self-regulation is all about. The fourth pillar is responsibility for impact. This is the ability to anticipate and accept how your presence, words, and decisions affect others. Authenticity without responsibility fractures trust rather than deepening it when you don't understand your impact. Look, we all want to be seen and accepted for who we are. But that doesn't mean that you just get to say and do whatever you want in the heat of the moment and expect others to accept that. You have to understand that the way you show up impacts others. And if you want to have high quality relationships, taking responsibility for impact while being authentic is the name of the game. The fifth pillar is empathy. Empathy is the ability to attune to and understand the emotional experiences of others without losing your own center. Empathy creates safety for that other person because they feel seen, but it doesn't require that you agree with them or that you're going to collapse and give them sympathy because you feel their feelings so deeply. Empathy is such an important quality as a leader, to be able to understand how other people might feel, to walk in their shoes, and still having the discernment to say, this is not mine to own, but I will walk beside you while you own it. That is empathy. The sixth pillar is ability to read the room. Reading the room gives you the capacity to sense the emotional state of a group. So when you walk into a room, at least on some level, you can understand what's going on. When you have the ability to read the room, you can walk in and you can adjust yourself, how you're showing up, to meet people where they are, to say, oh, this is the reality of the situation, rather than ignoring it or just plowing through. And then finally, the seventh pillar is boundaries. Having boundaries is the ability to distinguish between your own emotional state and that of others. Boundaries protect empathy from becoming enmeshment and intimacy from becoming exhaustion. That is so important. Being able to say, this is what I'm available for and this is what I'm not, is one of the most intimate things you can do in any relationship. People need to understand what your boundaries are. You need to understand what your boundaries are so that you don't overgive, that you don't overmanage, you don't overperform, or you don't just shut down when things get too hard, because that is the fastest way that you will break connection, damage relationships, and shut down other people. So these are the 7 pillars of emotional skill, and I wanted to share them with you because I thought it was such a concise and profound way to look at how you show up through self-awareness, through self-regulation, through understanding your impact, through empathy and boundaries and reading a room. All of these things are so incredibly important as a leader, and to name them like this allows us to do something about it. It allows us to say, oh, I need to work on this one. For me, boundaries was the big one. I feel responsible for people. I want everybody to be happy and to feel good. I was constantly trying to manage everything in a way that would make that happen. And I realized I was abandoning myself in those moments. So that was the area that I needed to work on. So if you're feeling overwhelmed because you think I need to work on all of these things, pick one, master that. My suggestion is you start with self-awareness. None of these are possible without self-awareness. So to wrap up this episode, I'd like to integrate this insight clearly. Emotional skill is the infrastructure that makes intimacy, trust, and sustainable leadership possible. And that's what we need to do as leaders. We need to have trust. We need to be able to create a sustainable ecosystem that our employees want to show up and give their very best for more than just a paycheck. This work is not about fixing others. And honestly, it's not even about fixing yourself. I think fixing yourself is the wrong way to look at things. It's about expanding your own capacity to stay present, regulated, and responsible in your relationships. When you learn how to do this, it will have a profound impact on your personal relationships and your professional relationships. This work is so important. This is the ownership mindset. Emotional skill is self-authorship at the nervous system level. And what I have learned in this journey, and I have been working on this for 20 years, but really with intention and awareness in this past year, as I have gone through probably the second biggest transformation in my life, is that connection, depth, growth, and truth are no longer optional in my life and leadership. They're not. I'm not available for anything that doesn't have depth, that isn't focused on growth, that isn't focused on truth, where I do not feel safe to say what needs to be said. I'm not available for that anymore. What I have learned, and I hope this resonates with you, is that relationships and leadership dynamics that lack emotional responsibility or regulation are not healthy relationships. And I know that you can't rid yourself of all of those in every instance, but you can certainly regulate yourself in those moments and create the boundaries that you need to create where you can't build those kinds of relationships. Because here's the truth. Intimacy is not entitlement. It is earned through presence, maturity, and skill, through intention. And if others aren't willing to meet you where you are, that's okay. They don't have to be in your life at that level of connection. But then think about the effort that you are putting into those relationships. Because what I've learned is that putting all that energy into relationships with people who are not willing or able to meet me at that level have always ended in pain for both of us. So, doesn't mean that you don't have a relationship with those people. It's just different. It's just surface level. And you're not trying to force them into the type of meaningful connection that you are looking for as you are thinking about your life and leadership. All right. So to wrap things up, let's go through the key takeaways of this episode. 1, emotional skill is a learnable leadership capability, not a personality trait. All of those 7 pillars, anybody can work on that and develop these skills. Number 2, intimacy is a function of regulation, not chemistry or intent. What does that mean? How you regulate yourself, how you show up, understanding your impact, being empathetic, being responsible for the quality of your relationships with vulnerability. That is all about regulation. It's not about, do I click with this person or do I intend to have a good relationship with this person? It's about how you are showing up with a regulated nervous system. Number 3, discernment reduces unnecessary conflict and suffering. What I mean by that is the ability to look at a situation and understand what emotional skill is needed in that moment to reduce conflict, to reduce the suffering, because you understand how you're feeling, why you're feeling it, what your impact is, and how to regulate yourself in that moment. I've learned that by being discerning about what's going on really with me and the other person, I don't tell myself stories about it. I can just take the reality of what's happening. This is just information, and it reduces my suffering so much. And it causes me to not get into conflict because I'm not assuming that I know what's going on when I don't. That is discernment. Number 4, responsibility for impact bridges authenticity and trust. When we take responsibility for how we are showing up, that means that we can be authentic, we can be ourselves. And at the same time, we think about how we're going to say, what we're going to say, when we're going to say it. We're going to own our own experiences so that it builds trust instead of just spewing our opinions or our emotions on other people. And then finally, number 5, boundaries make empathy and intimacy sustainable. Because without boundaries, we just give and give and give. Then at some point, that give and give and give becomes I just have to shut things down completely. And you put this wall down. At least that's how it was in my experience. And when this happens, empathy is actually sympathy. And when you put that wall down, you shut things down. So having those boundaries about what you're available for, what you're not available for, how you're going to walk beside somebody without taking their things on, how you're going to talk about tough things in conflict. Those types of boundaries are what create sustainable, long-term, deeply connected relationships. All right. I hope that this episode resonated with you and that you enjoyed learning about the 7 pillars of emotional skill. With that, I will leave you to your day. If you think that someone could benefit from learning about the 7 pillars of emotional skill, please share this with them. And if you like this podcast, go on to YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to it if you haven't already done that. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues and drop me a note. I always love hearing from you. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.